What if I told you that your greatest awakening is also the very thing that killed your hunger to move forward, that what you call laziness or loss of drive is in fact the death rattle of your old self, the ego, stripped bare before the unconscious? Tonight, we journey into that mystery, into the hidden chambers of your psyche where ambition dies, where the shadow rises, and where the self, your deepest truth, waits to be born. This is not just psychology. This is initiation, a symbolic descent into the underworld of the soul. And if you dare to follow, you will see why your awakening destroyed your motivation, and how it was always meant to. You once believed that your ambition was yours, that the burning drive to achieve, to conquer, to rise above others, was born purely from your will. But when the light of awakening touched you, when the veil of ordinary perception was torn away, you saw something unsettling. You discovered that much of what you called motivation was not yours at all. It belonged to the ego, that fragile mask you wear to survive in a world of appearances. The ego whispers promises of recognition, wealth, status, and triumph. It urges you to chase symbols, not substance. And for years, perhaps for decades, you obeyed, mistaking these whispers for the voice of destiny. But spiritual awakening is ruthless. It does not allow illusions to live. It tears the golden crown from the ego's head and shows you that what you once desired was not born from your soul. It was fed into you, like a story written by others, implanted through culture, family, and the collective unconscious. You see now that much of your ambition was borrowed, not chosen. You see that the race you were running had no true finish line, and in that moment, your fire burns out. The engine that pushed you forward halts, not because you are weak, but because the foundation of your striving has been revealed as hollow. This collapse of ego-driven ambition feels like death. You look at the goals you once worshipped, and they appear pale, lifeless, meaningless. The promotion, the possessions, the applause, they no longer taste sweet. They dissolve into dust before your very eyes. This is the first shock of awakening. The recognition that the ladder you were climbing leaned against a wall that never truly existed. And so, your body resists movement. The mind, stripped of its illusions, does not rush to chase the world as it once did. A great stillness takes hold of you, and in this stillness, you feel estranged from life itself. This is why so many who awaken speak of losing motivation, as though something vital has been stolen from them. But nothing has been stolen. Only the counterfeit flame has gone out. Carl Jung spoke often of the persona, the mask you wear to meet the demands of society. Your ambition, before awakening, was tied tightly to this mask. You did not strive for the self, you strove for the mask's survival. To be seen as worthy, to be loved, to belong. But once you awaken, the mask cracks, and the persona collapses under its own falseness. In this collapse, your old ambition dies because the mask it served no longer functions. The ego is dethroned, and with it falls the empire of shallow goals. At first, this emptiness terrifies you. You feel as though you have lost yourself, as though the very fire of life has abandoned you. But in truth, what has died is not the self. It is the illusion of the self. What has burned out is the false sun that once blinded you. And so you stand in shadow, confused, exhausted, unable to summon the will to continue the old ways. You no longer chase money with the same hunger. You no longer crave recognition in the same way. Even desires for comfort, for material pleasures, seem faint, distant. This is not a failure of spirit. It is the initiation into a deeper stage of being. The psyche, in its wisdom, has rejected the poison of hollow ambition. The unconscious no longer permits you to waste your energy feeding the ego's endless hunger. And though this feels like a kind of paralysis, it is a sacred stillness, a cleansing fire that clears the ground for something truer. Think of the archetype of the tower, struck by lightning. The tower represents the ego's ambitions, the structures we build to reach the heavens. But the lightning of awakening comes suddenly, violently, and the tower falls. You cannot rebuild it as it once stood, for its foundation was never stable. This is where you stand now, amidst the rubble of your former drives. And in that rubble, you search desperately for meaning, asking why your motivation has died. But the truth is this: your motivation has not died. It has been dismantled. The ego-driven engine has been turned off because it was never meant to carry you further. The deeper self, the archetypal center of your being, does not rush, does not strive, does not chase illusions. It waits silently until you are ready to listen, and it can only be heard after the noise of ambition has gone quiet. This collapse is necessary, though painful. It is the descent every seeker must endure. For only in this descent can you begin to distinguish what was false from what is real. Only here can you learn that the fire of ambition was never truly yours. It was a borrowed flame, feeding on the expectations of others. And when awakening snuffs it out, you are left in darkness. But this darkness is not empty. It is fertile, like the soil waiting for the seed. Here, in this collapse, lies the possibility of rebirth. But before rebirth, there must be silence. Before true purpose awakens, false ambition must fall. And so your motivation disappears, not as punishment, but as liberation. The ego's script has ended, and the self has not yet spoken. You are caught in the pause between two worlds, the liminal space where the old has died, but the new has not yet emerged. This is why awakening feels like betrayal. You expected power, energy, clarity. Instead, you were given stillness, emptiness, and disorientation. Yet in this stillness lies the threshold of transformation. You are no longer driven by the shallow fire of ego. You are being prepared for the deeper fire of the self. Until that fire reveals itself, you must endure the collapse, the quiet, the disintegration of everything you once thought you were. When the illusions of ego collapse, when ambition falls away and the mask of the persona cracks, something else begins to stir beneath the surface. It is not the light you expected, not the clarity you imagined would follow awakening. It is darker, heavier, unsettling. This is the moment when the shadow emerges. The shadow is not evil. It is not your enemy. It is the hidden self, the unacknowledged parts of your psyche, the desires you repressed, the anger you denied, the wounds you refused to face. Awakening does not only lift you into light, it drags you down into the depth of your own darkness. As the fire of ego-driven motivation dies, you find yourself face to face with impulses and truths you had long buried. This is why your hands feel heavy, why the will to act seems paralyzed. The shadow sits across from you like an ancient figure at a table, waiting for you to recognize it. It whispers to you in your dreams. It appears in sudden moods, in unexplained fears, in old memories rising uninvited. You thought awakening was only about transcendence, about rising above. But here you are, forced instead to descend into the basement of the soul. Carl Jung understood the shadow as everything the ego does not wish to see. Everything inconvenient, shameful, or contradictory to your polished image of self is pushed down into the unconscious. But what is pushed down does not vanish. It gathers power, it waits, and when the ego weakens, as it does in awakening, the shadow steps forward. The loss of motivation is not simply the absence of drive. It is the resistance of the shadow, refusing to allow you to return to old illusions. It interrupts you. It sabotages you. It tells you that what you once sought is meaningless, because it knows the truth your ego could not face. In this confrontation, life itself feels fragmented. You no longer recognize your own impulses. One part of you wants to move forward, but another part, darker and heavier, pulls you back. You feel trapped in contradiction. You wonder if you are broken, if your awakening has destroyed you. But what is happening is not destruction. It is integration. The shadow, long denied, insists now on being seen, and until you face it, your motivation will remain tangled, your energy blocked, your path uncertain. The shadow appears in symbolic forms. Sometimes it comes as laziness, the refusal to act. Sometimes it comes as anger, sudden and uncontrolled. Sometimes as apathy, a deadening of interest in everything you once loved. You may look at these states and condemn yourself, thinking you are failing. But in truth, these are the masks of the shadow. They are the signs that hidden material is pushing up from the unconscious, demanding recognition. You cannot go back to blind ambition because the shadow has exposed its emptiness. And you cannot move forward until you are willing to sit with the darkness, to listen, to learn what it holds. Jung spoke of the shadow as a moral problem, because to face it means to admit that you are not only what you claim to be, you are not only kind, disciplined, spiritual, and wise. You are also envious, resentful, fearful, driven by impulses you pretend do not exist. Awakening strips away your excuses and leaves you staring at these contradictions. This confrontation is not comfortable. It is not glamorous. It feels like being caught in a storm within your own mind, the winds of opposites tearing at you from every direction. In the silence after awakening, when egoic motivation has died, the shadow finds its chance to speak, and it speaks through your loss of will. That heaviness in your body, that sense that nothing matters, is the shadow holding your attention, forcing you to notice the parts of yourself you avoided. You cannot bypass this stage. If you try to rush ahead, to resurrect your old ambitions, the shadow will only grow stronger, manifesting as greater resistance, deeper exhaustion, or even illness of the psyche. The shadow is not here to destroy you. It is here to balance you. It is the weight that keeps the balloon of ego from floating too far from reality. In its dark depths are not only wounds and fears, but also hidden treasures, strengths you abandoned, passions you suppressed, instincts you denied. To face the shadow is to reclaim these lost parts. And this reclamation cannot happen until the false fires of ego have gone out, leaving you in the stillness where the shadow can no longer be ignored. This is why awakening kills your motivation. It is not that you no longer care. It is that the shadow has taken the stage, and it will not allow you to move forward until you face what lies within it. Motivation is frozen because the psyche demands your attention. It demands that you stop chasing the illusions outside and turn to confront the truths inside. The shadow will make itself known through every pause, every hesitation, every collapse of will. It will not let you run until you have acknowledged it, integrated it, and given it its rightful place in the whole of who you are. In this confrontation, you may dream of figures who frighten you, enemies who chase you, creatures lurking in the dark. These are the images of your shadow. In waking life, you may feel haunted by insecurities you thought you had outgrown. You may be overwhelmed by doubts, by urges, by contradictions. But each of these is the shadow speaking, saying, "See me, acknowledge me, stop pretending I do not exist." This process is not optional. It is not something you can skip. The path of awakening leads inevitably to the shadow, because only through facing the shadow can you become whole. Only by descending into this darkness can the self, the true center of your being, emerge in its fullness. The death of motivation is the shadow's demand that you turn inward. It is the psyche's way of ensuring that you do not escape yourself, that you cannot run forever from the truths buried within. When the false ambitions of the ego have fallen, and when the shadow has stepped into view, there comes a silence more profound than anything you have ever known. It is not the silence of peace, nor the silence of clarity. It is the silence of emptiness, the unsettling recognition that the structures of meaning that once gave you direction have dissolved. This is the void of meaning, the barren desert of the soul, where nothing feels worth striving for, where the world appears drained of color, and where every action feels suspended in futility. You may remember a time when life felt alive with purpose, even if that purpose was shallow. You rose in the morning with goals, with tasks, with desires. You pursued achievement, possessions, relationships, and recognition, believing each would fulfill you. But awakening has stripped these illusions away, and in their absence you find not the radiant clarity you expected, but a hollow space. The treasures you once longed for now look like trinkets. The victories you once dreamed of now taste like dust. And so you ask yourself, almost with despair, what is the point? This void of meaning is not a mistake in the path of awakening. It is a necessary stage. The psyche, when it sheds the ego's ambitions, must endure a time of emptiness before new meaning can emerge. Jung understood this as part of the individuation process, the death of the old patterns of life before the birth of the new. But in the midst of it, you feel as though you are standing in ruins. The temple has crumbled, and you do not yet see what sacred form will rise in its place. The void manifests as apathy, a dullness that seeps into every corner of your life. You wake, but you do not feel alive. You attempt to work, but your effort feels hollow. Even pleasures lose their taste, as though the very fabric of reality has grown thin and transparent. You may begin to question whether you are depressed, broken, or lost beyond repair. Yet this emptiness is not pathological, it is symbolic. It is the clearing away of false meanings to make space for the truth that has not yet arrived. Think of it as the archetype of death before rebirth. The old self, driven by ambition and ego, has died, but the new self has not yet emerged. You are caught in the liminal space, the in-between, where the only companion is the void itself, and in this void, all the old answers fail. Why work? Why strive? Why move at all when nothing shines with significance? These questions are not your enemy. They are the voice of the unconscious demanding that you look deeper, beyond the surface values that once governed your life. Jung spoke of the search for meaning as the central task of the second half of life. The first half is consumed with building, achieving, establishing a place in the world. But when awakening strips away these pursuits, you are thrust into the second half before you are ready. You are asked to face the great questions. What is life beyond ambition? What is worth living for when all that is temporary has been revealed as fragile? In this moment, meaning is not handed to you. It must be born out of you. The void is a womb as much as it is a tomb. It feels like nothingness, but within that nothingness stirs the possibility of a deeper, more authentic life. Yet before this life can come forth, you must endure the darkness of not knowing, the silence of absence. This is why your motivation vanishes, because the psyche refuses to move forward on a path that has lost its meaning. Your body resists. Your will collapses, not because you are failing, but because your inner being knows that to continue blindly would be to betray your own soul. You stand in the desert, thirsty for meaning, but every well you once drank from is dry. The applause of others no longer nourishes you. The accumulation of wealth feels empty. Even the pursuit of spiritual experiences may ring hollow, exposed as just another mask of the ego. Nothing outside of you can fill the void, and this realization is unbearable, until you begin to see that the void itself is the teacher. It is the darkness that prepares you to encounter the self. In myths and archetypes, this stage is often portrayed as the descent into the underworld. The hero leaves behind the ordinary world, stripped of weapons and companions, and must wander in darkness, facing trials with no clear purpose. This underworld is the void of meaning, where everything familiar has vanished and nothing new has yet been born. It is here that the soul is tested, not by action, but by endurance, not by ambition, but by patience. To stand in this void is to face the raw truth of existence without distraction, and it is in this emptiness that something subtle begins to shift. Slowly, quietly, the old craving for validation loosens. The old obsession with control fades. And though you may not notice it at first, the very act of surviving the void begins to awaken something more enduring. But for now, you remain in that vast emptiness, suspended between death and rebirth, where every familiar meaning has vanished, and the new has not yet revealed itself. When the ego's ambitions have collapsed, when the shadow has risen from the depths, and when you have wandered through the barren void of meaning, there begins a quiet stirring within you. At first, it is almost imperceptible, like the faint flicker of a flame in endless darkness. It does not roar like the fire of ambition once did. It does not shout with the urgency of the ego's demands. It whispers. It waits. It emerges not as hunger for achievement, but as alignment with something deeper, the self, the archetypal center of your being. This is the rebirth of authentic drive. Unlike the motivation you once knew, this drive is not built on striving for recognition or accumulating possessions. It is not a frantic race to prove your worth to the world. It does not burn you out with its relentless demands. This new drive flows from within, as if summoned by an unseen current. It is not ambition, it is calling. It does not ask, "What will make me important?" but rather, "What am I meant to embody?" And when it awakens, you feel the difference instantly. Where once you strained against yourself, pushing endlessly to achieve, now you feel as though something greater than you is moving through you, guiding your steps with purpose. Carl Jung spoke of the self as the totality of the psyche, both conscious and unconscious, the true center that directs the individuation process. When your ego collapses, and when the shadow has been confronted, you stand ready for the self to emerge. And when it does not restore the old kind of motivation. It offers something entirely new. It reveals to you the path not of ambition, but of destiny. The energy that arises here is not about chasing illusions. It is about embodying the truth of who you are. This authentic drive often begins subtly. It may come as a sense of peace when you move in a certain direction, or a deep unrest when you turn away from it. You might feel pulled toward certain actions, not because they promise rewards, but because they resonate with your very being. You discover that even small acts, when aligned with the self, carry a sense of significance that ego-driven achievements never could. Washing a dish, writing a page, speaking a word of truth, each becomes infused with meaning, not because the world applauds, but because the act itself is whole, aligned, complete. This rebirth does not happen instantly. You do not wake one morning with all answers clear, your life blazing with clarity. It grows slowly, like roots reaching into the soil before the tree rises into the light. And in this slow growth, you learn to listen differently. Instead of obeying the ego's shouts, you begin to attune to the quiet voice of the unconscious, the subtle guidance of dreams, the archetypal images that rise within you. The authentic drive is not frantic, it is patient, inevitable, and enduring. What once motivated you no longer holds sway. The applause of others does not move you as it once did. The lure of wealth and status no longer sparks desire. Even the idea of being seen as successful feels hollow compared to the quiet certainty of walking a path that is truly yours. This is the great paradox. You lose all motivation to chase, but you gain an unstoppable force to embody. The self does not demand effort in the way the ego did. It demands alignment. And once you align, the energy flows without resistance. The imagery of rebirth echoes through every mythology. The phoenix burns to ash before it rises in new form. The hero descends into the underworld, stripped of everything, before returning with a treasure not found in the ordinary world. So too, in your awakening, the fire of false ambition dies, and from its ashes rises the flame of authentic purpose. This flame does not consume you. It sustains you. It cannot be extinguished by failure or disappointment, because it does not depend on outcome. It exists simply because it is who you are. In this stage, you no longer ask, "What should I do to be successful?" Instead, you ask, "What am I called to express, no matter the cost?" The authentic drive does not calculate rewards. It does not measure worth in comparison to others. It compels you because to resist it is to betray your soul. And when you yield to it, you feel whole, as though every part of you, ego, shadow, unconscious, and self, have finally found their place in a greater harmony. This rebirth can feel disorienting at first. You may notice that the world around you continues to chase ego-driven ambitions, and you may feel out of step with it. While others compete and climb, you may find yourself uninterested in comparison, drawn instead to paths that seem quieter, subtler, yet filled with profound meaning. You are no longer fueled by the collective story of success. You are moved by the deeper current of individuation. And though this path may set you apart, it also grounds you more deeply in yourself than you have ever been. The authentic drive is not about achievement. It is about expression. It is about allowing the essence of your being to unfold in the world, in whatever form it takes. For one, it may be creating art. For another, it may be raising a child, speaking truth, serving others, or simply embodying presence in everyday life. The form does not matter, the alignment does. And once this alignment is found, you no longer need external motivation to push you forward. You are pulled, carried, moved by something greater than your conscious will. This is why the death of false motivation was necessary. The ego's fire had to die, so that the flame of the self could rise. The barren void had to strip you of old meanings, so that authentic meaning could be born. And in this rebirth, you discover a drive that cannot be broken by failure, cannot be drained by exhaustion, cannot be silenced by doubt. For it is not ambition. It is destiny flowing from the deepest center of who you are. So now you see why your awakening killed your motivation. It was never a loss. It was a death, a dismantling, a descent into the unconscious. First, the collapse of ego-driven ambition, then the confrontation with the shadow, then the vast void where meaning dissolved, and finally the slow rebirth of a drive that is no longer ambition but alignment with the self. You are not lazy. You are not broken. You are being remade. The fire that once consumed you was never truly yours. It was borrowed from the world, lit by expectations, fueled by illusions. That fire has burned out, and in its place, a new flame has appeared. A flame that cannot be seen by everyone, but can only be felt in the deepest chambers of your own soul. And so the question is no longer, how do I get back my old motivation? The question is, what within me is trying to be born, now that the old has died? If you dare to hold that question, if you dare to live in that mystery, then the very force that once felt like death will reveal itself as transformation. For awakening was never meant to make you chase harder. It was meant to make you become whole.